The morning of the wedding started like any other, the sun rising gently over the small town, casting a golden light over the streets and fields. Guests began arriving early, some traveling from nearby towns, others driving for hours just to be part of this special day. The venue was set in a charming old barn. It's decorated with soft white lights and fresh flowers that made the space feel warm and inviting. Laughter and chatter filled the air as friends and family greeted each other. Hugs and smiles exchanged freely. There was an unmistakable feeling of joy, excitement, and love. The groom stood by the entrance, adjusting his tie nervously, though he tried to hide it with a calm smile. He looked at the guests arriving one by one, feeling a mixture of happiness and responsibility. It was supposed to be the happiest day of his life, and he wanted everything to go perfectly. His bride, radiant in her simple, elegant dress, moved gracefully through the crowd, waving and smiling. The air smelled faintly of flowers and fresh bread from the bakery down the road, and the music softly playing in the background added to the peaceful scene. As the morning wore on, a motorcycle arrived, parked near the edge of the property. It was a large bike, shiny and black, with chrome gleaming in the sunlight. Most guests didn't pay it much attention, assuming it belonged to someone who preferred motorcycles over cars. But the groom's eyes lingered on it for a moment longer than usual. There was something about it, the way it was parked, the aura it carried, that made him feel slightly uneasy. He shrugged off the feeling, blaming it on pre-wedding nerves. Amidst the laughter and photo-taking, a man approached the groom. He was tall, rugged, and wore a leather jacket with patches that marked him as a Hell's Angel. His presence alone seemed to command attention. Yet he walked calmly, with a sense of purpose. The groom barely recognized him from the neighborhood, but the man had a reputation. He was someone who stayed out of trouble, but had a way of appearing when danger was near. The Hell's Angel asked to speak privately with the groom. Hesitant, the groom followed him to a quieter corner of the barn. There, away from the festivities, the man's tone was serious, almost grim. "They're coming," he said simply. "You need to be ready." The groom blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. "Who's coming?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The man shook his head slightly. "I can't explain everything here. Just trust me. Things are going to get messy if you're not prepared." The groom felt a chill run down his spine. He had always been cautious, but had never faced something that felt so ominous. He wanted to brush it off, to go back to the wedding and enjoy the day, but the seriousness in the man's eyes made him pause. There was no room for lies or exaggeration here. He was speaking from experience. Meanwhile, inside the barn, the guests continued their joyful celebration. Children ran around with ribbons and flowers, chasing each other, while older relatives exchanged stories and jokes. Music played softly, with some couples swaying gently to the tunes. Servers moved efficiently, offering drinks and snacks, and photographers captured candid moments of smiles and laughter. Everything seemed perfect on the surface, and most guests remained blissfully unaware of the tension growing just outside their happy bubble. The groom returned to the main hall, his mind racing. He tried to put on a smile for the guests and act like everything was normal. He couldn't let anyone see his worry. This was supposed to be a day of happiness. Yet every now and then, his gaze drifted toward the motorcycle parked outside, and then to the edge of the property, where trees and shadows seemed to stretch a little longer than they should. The feeling that something was about to happen refused to leave him. He watched his bride as she mingled with friends, laughing easily. Her joy was infectious, and for a brief moment, he almost forgot the warning. But then, a subtle movement caught his attention. Someone was standing near the tree line, just at the edge of the property, partially hidden by the shadows. The figure didn't move much, but the way they lingered made the groom's stomach tighten. He had no proof that anything was wrong, but the feeling of danger grew stronger. The Hell's Angel, noticing the groom's glance toward the tree line, stepped closer. "See what I mean?" he said quietly. "They're already here. I can't let them ruin this day for you or anyone else." The groom took a deep breath, trying to calm the panic rising inside him. He had to think clearly, plan carefully. This was his wedding day, but now he had to balance joy with vigilance. The thought of losing control, of putting his friends and family in harm's way, was unbearable. Back inside the barn, the wedding ceremony was about to begin. Guests found their seats, chatting excitedly about the couple. The groom's family beamed with pride, while friends whispered about the perfect weather and decorations. No one suspected the tension simmering just outside the barn walls. The atmosphere was warm and inviting, yet there was an undercurrent of unease only a few could sense. As the ceremony started, the groom's mind raced. He tried to focus on the vows, on the words that would bind him and his bride together, but his thoughts kept drifting. He noticed small details he hadn't paid attention to before. The way the doors were slightly ajar, the sound of a car engine in the distance, the fleeting shadow near the tree line. Each sign, no matter how minor, made him more aware that the warning was serious. The bride began walking down the aisle, radiant and graceful, and a hush fell over the crowd. The groom's heart swelled with love and pride. Yet, even in this moment of pure joy, the unease remained. The Hells Angels' words echoed in his mind. "They're coming. You need to be ready." After the vows were exchanged, and the couple shared their first kiss as husband and wife, the celebration moved to the reception. Guests enjoyed drinks, danced, and laughed, unaware of the growing danger outside. But the groom couldn't shake the feeling that the warning had not been a false alarm. Every sound, every shadow seemed amplified, and every time he glanced outside, he felt the presence of something waiting, watching. The Hells Angels stayed near the edges of the crowd, blending in, yet observing everything carefully. He had a plan, one he hoped he wouldn't need to execute, but he was prepared. The groom caught his eye briefly, a silent reassurance passing between them. The man's experience and calm presence were the only things keeping the groom from succumbing entirely to fear. As the afternoon wore on, small unusual events began to occur. A guest reported a car circling the property repeatedly. A server mentioned a stranger lingering near the parking area, asking odd questions. Even the photographer noticed someone taking pictures from a distance, hiding behind trees and bushes. Each incident seemed minor on its own, but together, they painted a picture the groom couldn't ignore. Despite the rising tension, the celebration continued. Children laughed, music played, and guests danced, creating a stark contrast to the groom's growing anxiety. He realized that his responsibility wasn't just to enjoy the day, but to protect the people he loved. He needed a plan, even if it meant hiding his fear and acting normal in front of everyone. The Hells Angel approached him again, whispering, "Trust your instincts. Don't let anyone see you panic. You can handle this, but you need to act smart." The groom nodded silently. He felt the weight of the warning, understanding for the first time that it was not just a precaution, it was a lifeline. Every decision he made from that moment on could determine the safety of the people around him. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the property, the groom felt a cold sense of anticipation. The joyous celebration continued around him, yet he knew that the calm was temporary. He couldn't shake the feeling that the warning was only the beginning. Something was coming, something that could turn this day from the happiest of his life into the most terrifying. With a final glance at the Hells Angel, the groom silently promised himself that he would be ready. He would protect his bride, his family, and every guest. Whatever was coming, he would face it, head-on. The celebration carried on, unaware of the storm approaching. But behind the smiles and laughter, a sense of vigilance had taken root. The groom's mind raced with possibilities, strategies, and worst-case scenarios, each one sharpening his focus and resolve. The barn was filled with the sounds of music, conversation, and laughter, but outside, the shadows lengthened, and the motorcycle sat quietly, a silent reminder of the warning that had been given. The groom knew that soon everything would change. For now, though, he had to keep smiling, keep dancing, keep celebrating, even as the feeling of dread lingered at the edge of his consciousness. He had been warned, and he would be ready. The afternoon sun cast a warm glow over the reception, making the decorations shine and the colors of the flowers even brighter. Guests laughed and shared stories, unaware of the tension building quietly outside. The groom tried to keep a normal face, but inside his mind raced with thoughts of the warning. The words of the Hell's Angel echoed in his mind. They're coming. You need to be ready. He couldn't shake the unease, and every little movement in the shadows caught his attention. He slipped away from the crowd for a moment, walking toward the edge of the property. From there, he could see the trees lining the nearby road and the open field beyond. He noticed a car slowly making its way down the road, pausing and moving again, as if someone was observing the property. He squinted, trying to make out the figure inside, but the tinted windows made it impossible. He felt a cold knot in his stomach. This was no longer just a warning. Something was happening. He returned to the barn, trying to blend in with the guests. The laughter and music seemed almost cruel in their normalcy, considering the danger he suspected was approaching. His bride danced with friends, completely unaware of the storm brewing nearby. He felt torn between staying calm for her and preparing for what might come. The Hell's Angel approached him again, leaning in close enough to whisper, "They've been planning this. You need to keep everyone inside and stay alert." The groom nodded, swallowing hard. He didn't want to worry anyone, so he simply kept smiling and talking, but his eyes constantly scanned the area. He noticed a man leaning against a tree a little too far from the guests, watching intently. The groom's heart pounded. He hadn't seen the figure before, and there was something about the way he moved that felt deliberate and controlled. Inside the barn, the reception continued, and the groom's mind worked faster than ever. He began to consider practical steps. He asked a few of the servers discreetly to double-check that the doors were locked and to keep an eye out for anything unusual. He instructed the photographer to keep the camera inside, so any suspicious behavior outside could be noticed without alarming the guests. Everything had to be subtle, nothing that would make the wedding feel like a battleground. Meanwhile, the Hell's Angel stayed on the outskirts of the property. He was calm, but his eyes missed nothing. He'd dealt with situations like this before, and he knew that being proactive was the only way to prevent disaster. He quietly observed the surroundings, his presence almost like a shadow that no one noticed but the groom could sense. His experience reassured the groom, though he still felt a weight pressing on his chest. Back inside, small disturbances began to appear, subtle yet unsettling. A car engine revved outside, far enough away to seem accidental, yet close enough to draw the groom's attention. A stranger appeared near the parking lot, pretending to tie his shoe while surveying the barn. The groom caught the Hell's Angel watching the man and knew that he had seen the same thing. There was no mistaking it. They were observing, planning, waiting. The groom's mind wandered briefly to the past, trying to understand why anyone would target his wedding. A memory surfaced of an incident years ago involving his family, something he thought had been long forgotten. Perhaps someone held a grudge, or perhaps it was a mistake. Either way, the past had found its way to the present, threatening to disrupt what should have been a perfect day. The realization made him feel vulnerable, but he also felt a surge of determination. He would not allow fear to take over. As the afternoon light faded, the groom discreetly gathered a few trusted friends, explaining that he had noticed some unusual activity outside. He didn't go into details, but emphasized vigilance and caution. His friends, loyal and protective, immediately understood and quietly moved to help him monitor the perimeter. Together they scanned the property, noting every shadow, every movement, every sound that seemed out of place. The Hell's Angel approached again, this time speaking more seriously. "They're getting closer. You need to be ready to move quickly if something happens. Don't wait. Protect the people you love first." The groom's stomach tightened. He realized that no matter how much he tried to keep the celebration normal, the threat was real, and it was imminent. He glanced back at the barn, where guests continued to enjoy themselves, laughing and chatting. They had no idea that danger lurked just beyond the walls. He made a silent promise to himself. He would do everything in his power to keep them safe. As evening approached, the wedding began to transition to dinner and speeches. The groom stayed vigilant, watching the parking area, the road, and the tree line. Every sound made him flinch slightly, the rustle of leaves, the creak of a fence, the distant bark of a dog. Each small noise was magnified in his mind, reminding him that the warning had not been given lightly. The Hell's Angel remained a constant. Presence moving subtly through the crowd, always near enough to intervene if needed, but never drawing attention. He had seen many situations like this and knew that subtlety was key. Panic would be dangerous, but calm readiness could save lives. The groom found comfort in this, though the tension never fully left him. Inside, the bride gave a speech, thanking everyone for coming and expressing her happiness. The guests applauded, and the groom joined in, forcing himself to smile genuinely. Every word from her mouth reminded him of what he was protecting. He felt a mixture of pride, love, and fear. He had to keep them safe, and he couldn't afford mistakes. Suddenly, a server whispered to the groom, pointing discreetly toward a group of trees at the far edge of the property. Shadows moved strangely, and the figures seemed to communicate in subtle gestures. The groom's heart sank. The warning was no longer hypothetical. It was happening. He could see the outlines of people moving carefully, trying not to be noticed. He turned to the Hell's Angel, who gave a barely perceptible nod. The groom took a deep breath and moved quietly toward his friends who were monitoring the area. Together, they began to coordinate quietly, keeping an eye on the figures in the distance. Their movements were careful, subtle, and precise. They couldn't let the guests notice, but they also couldn't afford to wait for something to happen. The tension grew, a quiet storm that hovered just beyond the festivities. Inside, music continued, and people danced, laughed, and ate. The contrast between the carefree celebration and the groom's growing anxiety was stark. He had to maintain appearances while preparing for the possibility of confrontation. Every decision was critical. Every misstep could put lives at risk. He felt a weight he had never experienced before, but he also felt a sense of clarity. He knew what needed to be done. The Hell's Angel whispered a final piece of advice before moving back to survey the perimeter. If they make a move, act immediately. Don't wait for proof. Trust your instincts. The groom nodded, feeling the gravity of the situation. He glanced back at the barn, seeing his bride laughing with friends, completely unaware, realized that this was no longer just a wedding day. It was a test of courage, vigilance, and quick thinking. He had to balance celebration with protection, joy with readiness. As the sun dipped below the horizon, shadows lengthened, and the air grew cooler. The strange figures near the tree line moved with greater purpose, their intentions becoming clearer. The groom felt a surge of determination. He would not let this day, this moment, be ruined. He would protect everyone, no matter what it took. Before the storm was over, and the real challenge was about to begin, could only hope that his preparation, the help of the Hell's Angel, and his own instincts would be enough to face whatever was coming. The night fell slowly over the small town, painting the sky in shades of deep orange and purple. The wedding lights twinkled against the darkness, creating an illusion of calm and warmth. Inside the barn, the music had softened, and the guests began to settle into smaller conversations and laughter. The clinking of glasses and soft murmur of voices made everything seem ordinary, even peaceful. Yet outside, the groom's unease had only grown stronger. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen, that the warning he had received was not just a precaution. He had tried to keep a normal face, to enjoy the celebration, but every time he glanced toward the edges of the property, he saw movement. Shadows shifted among the trees, and the occasional flicker of headlights on the distant road made him tense. The Hell's Angel had stayed near the perimeter, calm and observant. A reassuring presence, even as the groom's nerves tightened with every passing minute. The groom approached a few of his closest friends, quietly, pointing out the areas that seemed suspicious. He asked them to watch discreetly while still blending in with the guests. They understood immediately, nodding without question. There was no time for panic, only for alertness. The groom felt a mix of fear and determination, wanted to enjoy his wedding, but protecting his friends, family, and bride had become the priority. Meanwhile, a few unusual events began to happen that made it clear the threat was real. A delivery truck that should have left hours ago was still parked near the entrance, and a man lingered by it, checking his phone frequently. Another figure was seen near the tree line, crouching for a moment before straightening up and moving along the edge of the property. These details, though small, painted a picture of careful planning. The groom realized that the danger was approaching fast. Inside, the reception continued with speeches and toasts. The bride stood at the head of the table, thanking everyone for coming and expressing her joy. Her voice was steady, full of happiness, and for a brief moment, the groom allowed himself to feel the normal emotions of the day. But the tension in his chest returned quickly. He had to stay alert, and he had to keep others unaware of the growing danger. The Hell's Angel leaned close, whispering a quiet warning. They're testing the perimeter. They want to see what's here and how easy it is to get in. You have to stay ready. The groom nodded, his heart racing. He looked around the room, seeing his friends laughing, his bride smiling, and children playing with flower petals. The contrast between the joy inside and the threat outside made him feel a strange mix of emotions. Love, fear, and responsibility all collided inside him. He had to act carefully, ensuring no one panicked while remaining ready to respond to any danger. He stepped outside for a moment, pretending to check on something, and scanned the area again. He noticed a car parked on the road, engine running, headlights off, partially hidden by the shadows. Two figures were inside, moving slightly, as if communicating in subtle gestures. The groom's stomach tightened. This was not random. They were organized, observing, preparing. He made a mental note to alert his friends to tighten the watch on the perimeter, and to keep the guests inside. Returning to the barn, he discreetly signaled to a few friends who quietly spread out to monitor doors, windows, and the surrounding property. Each person had a task, each movement subtle and careful. The groom realized that every second counted, that every unnoticed action could mean the difference between safety and disaster. His mind raced through possible scenarios, planning responses for each one while maintaining a calm appearance. The night grew darker, and the temperature dropped slightly, causing a gentle chill in the air. Guests moved closer together, lighting small candles and lanterns, their soft glow casting flickering shadows on the walls. The groom kept his eyes on the edges of the property, where shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally long. He noticed subtle signals, small signs that confirmed the Hell's Angels' warning they were approaching. And they were careful. Inside, the mood remained joyful, but the groom could feel the tension building in his chest. He remembered the Hell's Angels' words, "Trust your instincts. Don't wait for proof. Protect the people you love first." The thought lingered, sharpening his focus. He knew that if things escalated, he had to act immediately. There was no time for hesitation. He walked back to his bride, smiling as he offered her a drink. She looked up at him, radiant and full of love, and he felt the surge of protectiveness wash over him. He wanted to assure her, to make her feel safe, but he couldn't reveal the true danger. He had to balance the happiness of the evening with the growing threat outside. Every movement, every word had to be measured, carefully chosen. As he watched the guests, he noticed a few people behaving oddly, glancing toward the edges of the property, moving cautiously or whispering among themselves. These small signs confirmed what he already suspected. The intruders were near. They were testing boundaries, trying to determine the safest way to approach. The groom's pulse quickened. He had to be ready for whatever came next. The Hell's Angel approached him once more, this time with a small piece of advice. If they make a move, don't hesitate. You may have to act before they even show themselves fully. Keep everyone inside and stay calm. That's your advantage. The groom nodded, swallowing hard. He felt a mix of fear, responsibility, and determination. He had trained his mind for moments like this, though he had never imagined facing danger on the happiest day of his life. The juxtaposition of celebration and threat made every heartbeat sharper, every sound more pronounced. Guests continued to dance, laugh, and enjoy the evening. The groom could hear the soft notes of the music, the occasional clink of glasses, and the gentle hum of conversation. It was a normal night for them, but for him, it was a delicate balance of observation, planning, and emotional control. He moved through the crowd subtly, checking on friends, scanning the property, and remaining vigilant. Suddenly, a shadow shifted near the barn doors. The groom's heart skipped a beat. He instinctively moved closer to the Hell's Angel, who had already noticed it and positioned himself near the doors. The movement was subtle, but deliberate, confirming the presence of someone with intent. The groom realized that the calm they had been enjoying was temporary. and that the night could turn dangerous at any moment, he returned to his bride once more, making a show of participating in the celebration while internally preparing for the confrontation that could come. Every detail mattered: the location of the doors, the visibility of the perimeter, the readiness of his friends. The groom understood that vigilance now could save lives later. The night deepened, and the air grew cooler, carrying the faint sounds of distant traffic and the occasional bark of a dog. The groom's attention remained on the property's edges, where subtle movements hinted at the presence of intruders. He felt a knot of tension in his chest, but also a clear sense of purpose. He had been warned. He had prepared. He was ready to act. The Hell's Angel gave a final nod before moving slightly away, continuing to watch the perimeter. The groom felt reassured by his calm presence. He knew that they had the advantage if they remained vigilant and coordinated. The threat was real, but with careful planning and quick thinking, they could prevent disaster. Inside, the guests continued their celebration, oblivious to the growing danger outside. The groom moved among them, keeping his smile genuine while remaining alert. He checked on friends discreetly, ensuring that everyone was aware of their roles without alarming the crowd. The atmosphere was a delicate balance of joy and tension, each moment requiring careful navigation. As the evening progressed, the groom felt the pressure mounting. The intruders were getting closer, their intentions clearer with each passing minute. He could see subtle changes in movement and behavior at the edge of the property, confirming that the Hell's Angel's warning had been accurate. The groom's focus sharpened, and he prepared mentally for the next phase. Knowing that the calm could end at any moment, he glanced at his bride once more. Seeing her smiling and laughing, completely unaware of the danger, his heart swelled with love and protectiveness. He realized that the moments of joy were worth defending, and that he would do whatever it took to keep everyone safe. The night was far from over, and the warning had not been ignored. The groom was ready to face whatever came next. Knowing that vigilance, preparation, courage would be their greatest allies, the calm that had lingered over the wedding finally began to break. It started subtly, the rustling of leaves outside the barn, and a faint shadow that moved unnaturally at the edge of the property. The groom's heart tightened as he noticed the signs he had feared. The Hell's Angel, standing near the perimeter, tensed slightly, his eyes scanning every shadow, every movement. The warning had come true, and the danger was no longer distant. It was arriving inside. The music continued, soft and pleasant, but it felt disconnected from the tension outside. Guests were still laughing and chatting, unaware of the storm approaching. The groom knew that this illusion of normalcy could not last long. He had to prepare himself, his friends, and his bride for what was about to unfold. He quietly signaled to a few trusted friends, guiding them to positions near the doors and windows. Making sure they were ready to act without drawing attention, the first real indication of danger came when a figure appeared at the tree line, moving closer with careful steps. The groom's stomach churned as he recognized the deliberate, calculated way the person advanced. This was not random. It was intentional, planned. The Hell's Angel moved slightly, signaling to the groom that it was time to be fully alert. They had watched, waited, and now the confrontation was beginning. Suddenly, the intruders made their presence known more directly. A loud bang echoed from the side of the barn, causing a few guests to jump. The groom's heart pounded in his chest, but he remained calm, hiding his fear behind a reassuring smile. The Hell's Angel quickly moved toward the doors, positioning himself to block any direct approach, while the groom and his friends subtly guided guests toward safer areas inside the barn. The bride noticed something was wrong when she saw her husband moving with a purpose that didn't match the relaxed atmosphere. She opened her mouth to ask, but he placed a finger to his lips, signaling her to stay calm. She nodded, trusting him completely, unaware of the full scope of what was happening. The groom's training in remaining composed under pressure became vital. Every movement had to be precise. Every decision immediate yet measured. The intruders tried to force their way toward the barn, testing the defenses the groom had quietly put in place. The Hell's Angel, experienced and decisive, intercepted them. Using his presence and authority to push them back without causing panic, The groom watched closely, coordinating with his friends to ensure that no guest was in the path of danger. The adrenaline surged, but he maintained a calm exterior, knowing that panic could be more dangerous than the intruders themselves. Guests began to notice subtle changes, the soft clatter of something moving outside, a shadow flitting past the windows, and the sudden tension in the groom's movements. Whispers began to circulate, some curious, some anxious. The bride held her husband's hand tightly, sensing his focus and determination. She felt a mix of fear and trust, knowing that he was protecting them all. The intruders, realizing they could not simply walk in, became bolder in their attempts. They tried different entrances, moved in coordinated steps, and communicated silently among themselves. The groom's friends responded quickly, positioning themselves strategically, ready to intercept if necessary. The Hell's Angel remained calm, steady presence that reminded the groom to stay composed and think clearly. A particularly tense moment occurred when one of the intruders reached a side door, attempting to enter. The groom, anticipating this, had a friend quietly block the doorway, guiding the person back without confrontation. The intruder retreated momentarily, but it was clear they were determined. Each attempt, each movement, heightened the tension, turning the once joyful wedding into a controlled, high-stakes situation. Inside the barn, the guests tried to maintain their celebrations. Some whispered questions, some exchanged nervous glances, but the groom kept them distracted, using subtle charm and humor to ease their fears. He moved among them, ensuring that no one panicked while remaining vigilant for the next move from the intruders. The balance between celebration and protection was delicate, and he managed it with quiet precision. The Hell's Angel, ever watchful, noticed a particularly aggressive approach from one intruder and signaled to the groom. They had to act decisively now. The groom gathered his closest friends, forming a small, prepared team ready to respond immediately. Every member knew their role, every movement calculated. The sense of urgency was palpable, but discipline and focus prevented chaos. Suddenly, another loud sound, like a crash, came from the nearby fence line. The groom's heart skipped a beat, but he didn't let fear show. He directed the guests to stay calm, moving them subtly away from doors and windows. The intruders were testing reactions, looking for weakness, but the groom's careful planning kept them from finding it. Every shadow, every sound, was scrutinized for signs of the next move. The bride clung to him briefly, sensing both fear and determination. She whispered that she trusted him completely. Her faith gave him strength. He realized that protecting her and the guests was no longer just about vigilance, it was about courage, quick thinking, and decisive action. The threat was real, but his resolve was stronger. The intruders, growing frustrated by the lack of easy access, began to communicate more aggressively. Their voices, though distant, carried a threat, a challenge. The groom's friends positioned themselves strategically, blocking any potential entry points while keeping the guests calm. The Hell's Angel moved with authority, intercepting anyone who tried to approach too closely. Every passing minute felt like an eternity. The groom felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He couldn't afford mistakes, couldn't afford hesitation. Every decision mattered. His mind raced, calculating risks, anticipating moves, and preparing for every possible scenario. The intruders were organized, but the groom and his team had the advantage of awareness and preparation. A moment of suspense arose when one intruder tried a more daring approach. Slipping close to the barn under the cover of darkness, the groom, anticipating this, silently signaled a friend, who moved to intercept without alarming anyone. The intruder was gently but firmly guided back, frustration evident in their movement. The groom realized that the Hell's Angel's warning had been a gift. They had acted before the danger could escalate further. Inside, the guests continued their celebration, though a few could sense something was off. The groom remained the pillar of composure, his calm demeanor keeping everyone reassured. He moved fluidly through the barn, checking on tables, guiding friends, and subtly positioning himself to respond instantly if needed. The contrast between the ongoing celebration and the growing tension outside created a strange and almost surreal atmosphere. The night grew darker, and the air was filled with the faint sounds of the approaching intruders. The groom's senses were heightened, every movement, every shadow, every sound amplified in his mind. He realized that preparation, vigilance, and calm were the keys to keeping everyone safe. Panic was the enemy. Composure was their shield. The Hell's Angel, sensing a critical moment, nodded toward the groom. It was time to act if necessary. The groom's friends were in position, the guests subtly guided away from danger, and every pathway carefully monitored. They were ready for any escalation, any sudden attempt to enter. The sense of readiness gave the groom a quiet confidence, even amidst the fear, as the intruders tested the perimeter again. The groom's careful planning and the Hell's Angels' experience ensured that they were met with calm, controlled resistance. The intruders could not breach the defenses without revealing their intentions fully. The groom realized that their preparation, subtle yet effective, had bought them time and safety. The tension reached its peak when the intruders made another coordinated attempt, moving closer to the barn with purpose. The groom, heart racing, signaled his friends and positioned himself strategically near his bride and key guests. The Hell's Angel intercepted the first intruder, using a combination of presence and skill to stop them without chaos. The groom guided others inside, keeping everyone calm and focused. Every second was critical. The intruders tested, probed, and retreated only to try another approach. The groom and his team responded with precision, staying one step ahead. His mind was a whirlwind of calculations, every decision measured, every movement deliberate. The contrast between the calm interior and the chaos outside heightened the intensity of the moment. The bride, noticing the groom's unwavering focus, felt a mixture of fear and trust. She realized the gravity of the situation without fully understanding the danger. Her presence reminded the groom of what he was protecting, fueling his determination to stay composed and vigilant. Every glance, every reassuring smile, was a silent message of protection and courage. The night continued with careful balance. The intruders, growing more frustrated, began to test different approaches, each met with subtle resistance. The groom's preparation and the Hell's Angels' expertise kept the guests safe and the intruders at bay. The wedding, once a simple celebration, had transformed into a controlled operation of vigilance, strategy, and courage. The groom moved among the guests, offering calm words, subtle guidance, and quiet reassurance. The Hell's Angel maintained a watchful eye, ready to intervene if necessary. The intruders' repeated attempts only reinforced the importance of preparation, composure, and courage. The night had become a test of vigilance, quick thinking, and human resilience. And the groom was determined to face it head-on. The night had grown deep, with the sky a dark blanket dotted with stars. The twinkling lights of the barn cast a warm glow on the faces of the guests, who, for the most part, were still unaware of the danger that had circled them all evening. The groom, however, felt the weight of the warning he had received earlier, and he knew that the moment to act decisively was now. The intruders had become more aggressive, testing their defenses and probing for weaknesses, and it was clear that they intended to escalate their presence. The Hell's Angel remained a calm, commanding presence, standing at the edge of the barn and keeping a watchful eye on the perimeter. His experience had taught him that timing and composure were everything in situations like this. The groom, following his lead, moved through the barn with purpose, signaling to his closest friends, ensuring they were in position to protect the guests and respond immediately to any threat. Every movement was subtle but precise, every decision deliberate. Suddenly, one of the intruders made a bold move, stepping closer to the barn with a flashlight in hand. The beam flickered across the edge of the property, and for a brief moment, the groom could see the determined look on the person's face. It was then that the groom realized that subtlety and vigilance could only carry them so far. They had to act quickly. The groom instructed a friend to quietly secure the doors and another to keep watch on the windows. The guests remained largely oblivious, chatting and laughing, unaware of the calculated movements just beyond the walls. The bride, sensing something different in the groom's behavior, held his hand tightly, trusting his judgment completely. Her presence was grounding, reminding him of what was truly important, protecting the people he loved. The intruders tried multiple approaches, but the coordinated efforts of the groom, his friends, and the Hell's Angel kept them from gaining any advantage. Each time someone moved toward the barn, they were met with quiet but firm resistance. The groom had anticipated their moves and had prepared for each one, ensuring that the guests remained safe. His heart raced with adrenaline, but he maintained an outward calm, giving a reassuring smile whenever a guest glanced at him in curiosity. The Hell's Angel, noticing a particularly aggressive approach, stepped in decisively, using his commanding presence to push the intruders back without escalating the situation unnecessarily. The groom and his friends coordinated seamlessly, guiding the intruders away from the barn and toward less populated areas. Their combined vigilance and quick thinking created a protective barrier around the guests. Despite the tension, the groom made a point to check on his bride and the guests, offering calm words and subtle reassurances. He understood that fear could spread quickly, and maintaining a sense of normalcy was just as important as vigilance. The Hell's Angel had shown him that composure could be as effective a defense as any physical barrier. The intruders, frustrated by their inability to gain access, began to retreat momentarily, regrouping to plan their next move. This brief pause allowed the groom and his team to reassess their positions and ensure that all guests were safe. He guided the bride to a more secure area within the barn, away from doors and windows. While his friends positioned themselves strategically to intercept any further attempts, the groom took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility, yet also a surge of determination. He realized that the night had become more than just a wedding. It had turned into a test of courage, preparation, and quick thinking. The Hell's Angel's warning had been a lifeline, and now every lesson and every precaution mattered more than ever. As the night wore on, intruders made one final attempt to breach the perimeter. They moved with precision, trying to find an opening, but the groom and his team were ready. The Hell's Angel intercepted the lead intruder, and a tense but controlled confrontation ensued. The groom coordinated silently with his friends, ensuring that everyone remained safe while the situation was contained. The intruders, realizing they had underestimated the vigilance and preparation of those inside, finally withdrew, retreating into the shadows from which they had come. Relief washed over the groom. Though he remained vigilant for any further attempts, the threat had passed, but the experience left a lasting impression. He checked on every guest, ensuring that they were unharmed and calm. The bride, holding his hand, expressed gratitude and admiration for his composure and quick thinking. Together, they walked through the barn, offering quiet reassurances and checking that all was well. The Hell's Angel gave a final nod to the groom, a silent acknowledgement of their success and the danger that had been avoided. The groom felt a profound sense of respect and gratitude for the man who had warned him, guided him, and acted decisively when the situation demanded it. The presence of the Hell's Angel had been crucial, and the groom knew that the evening could have ended very differently without his guidance. Guests, gradually realizing that something unusual had occurred, whispered among themselves, curious but unharmed. The groom addressed them calmly, explaining that there had been a minor incident outside and that everyone was safe. His calm demeanor reassured them, turning fear into relief. Laughter and conversation slowly resumed, though a heightened sense of awareness lingered in the background. The bride and groom finally shared a quiet moment together, reflecting on the evening. Their hands intertwined, they acknowledged the unusual turn of events and the courage it had demanded. The groom realized that love and protection had been tested in ways he had never imagined, and that the bond between them and their friends had grown stronger through the experience. As the night continued, the couple returned to their celebration, maintaining the appearance of normalcy while also carrying the lessons of vigilance and courage. Guests danced, laughed, and enjoyed the remainder of the evening, grateful for the calm resolution and unaware of the danger that had hovered so close. The groom took one last look at the perimeter. Noting the absence of movement and the retreat of the intruders, he felt a mixture of relief and pride. The evening had transformed from a simple celebration into a testament of preparation, courage, and quick thinking. The Hells Angels' warning, though initially unsettling, had been a critical turning point, allowing the groom to act decisively and protect everyone he loved as the stars twinkled above. The groom and his bride held each other, surrounded by friends and family, grateful for safety and the shared experience. The night, though marked by tension and danger, ended in relief, unity, and strengthened bonds. They had faced fear, acted with courage, and emerged with their loved ones unharmed. The groom reflected on the lessons of the evening: trust instincts, act decisively, and value the guidance of those with experience. The Hells Angel had provided more than a warning. He had given knowledge, preparation, and reassurance. The groom understood that while life could present unexpected dangers, courage, preparation, and unity could overcome them. The wedding, though transformed by the events of the night, ended on a note of hope, gratitude, and love. The guests returned to their celebrations with smiles, laughter, and a shared sense of relief. The groom and his bride, hand in hand, realized that even in the face of fear and uncertainty, the bonds of love, friendship, and trust could carry them through. The night would be remembered not just for the celebration, but for the courage and vigilance that had ensured everyone's safety. Turning a potential nightmare into a story of resilience and human spirit,